This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today I'm here with Smoke Wallin of Vertical Wellness. Smoke, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Hall.
Great. So what was your background before joining Vertical Wellness?
Well, I spent over 25 years in the beverage alcohol space. When I got out of Cornell, I joined Seagram and then jumped over to one of their major distributors. And we built a $1 billion wine and spirits distribution company in the Midwest, which later we merged into another company, which is now a $1 billion wine and spirits, or $11 billion wine and spirits distribution company. So I really got my early training in the drinks business. I got to serve as chairman and president of the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, and then went on to do a lot of my own brands of whiskey and vodka, and I had a craft brewery and wineries, and did a lot in that space. And then when I sold out of my last whiskey project a few years ago, my wife turned to me and said, "Before you do another liquor deal, we got to look at the cannabis and hemp business."
Well, that's great. And so what's your advice for people investing in this space?
You've got to invest behind people who have a track record and have experience. And in this case, the track record is unlikely to be in the space, right? Because it's so new. So you have to look at parallel industries. And the management matters a lot. This is things that are changing in terms of regulatory structure, in terms of capital flows in and out, in terms of what's available. And I think you've got to have a team that is resilient and has experience dealing with lots of adversity. I always bet on people.
That's great. So how is the industry evolving these days, and what changes do you see coming up?
Well, it's interesting. The Farm Bill of 2018, passed the end of that year, and that led to a whole bunch of folks jumping into hemp. A lot of farmers grew hemp without necessarily a plan of what to do with it. A lot of money flowed into the space, and we got around a harvest of last year, and there was an oversupply, and that was due because a lot of people jumped in, but also the FDA has been less than helpful in terms of their guidance on what is permissible and not permissible in terms of ingestibles, beverages, and food. And so that slowed down retail adoption. So all these kind of factors hit the industry late last year, and that's caused quite a bit of disruption. 7 of the largest companies who raised over $400 million went out of business in the last 9 months. And I say that, it's obviously a very serious matter, but that created a lot of opportunity for us. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit, but we've emerged very strong from all this turmoil.
And so what's the current growth rate of the sector now?
Well, the interesting thing is the sector is growing very rapidly. And even during the COVID shutdown, the demand for CBD has not done anything but go up. It's the distribution channels that have been throttling it back, right? So there's not a lot of retailers that currently sell all forms of the product. A lot of the business is still being done online, but consumer demand is strong and growing. And so that's encouraging. People are using cannabinoids, and in particular CBD, to help them with anxiety, to help with sleeplessness, to help with pain. And these are all things that we're seeing more and more medical studies coming out and proving. But there's just a huge amount of consumer interest in the space, and that's building the growth significantly.
Great. And so how many companies are engaged in it today?
Well, there's only a handful that are doing the full-scale production back end like we are, right? So there's a small number of large-scale producers who are processing hemp at scale. And then there's a lot of little brand companies. So it's interesting because I'm in both sides, right? So we process hemp. We've grown a lot of hemp, 1,800 acres last year, 4 million pounds. I'm processing for other people too. That's one reason that we've been very successful in this tough time, is that we've leveraged our infrastructure to process for others. And that's given us, 20 million pounds of hemp processing this year, which is a huge number. But on the brand side, I'm like the only processor who's actually in the brand business. And So I'm dealing with lots of little startup brands all over the place that have no supply of their own, but they've got an idea. And so we've got a whole brand portfolio. So it's interesting. There's quite a few entrants, but there's really nobody that's kind of doing it with all sides of the industry vertically integrated like we are.
Oh, great. And so what challenges do you see in this space today?
Well, the pricing in the market continues to be tough. So prices of hemp, prices of CBD, came way down in the last year because of this slowdown in distribution and because of the significant amount of growing that happened. And I think, I see that continuing for some time. We're not sure when the FDA is going to change their position on ingestibles, but we know it's going to happen. At the very least, Congress is going to end up having to act if FDA doesn't. But, it could happen sooner rather than later. We're hoping for that. But that's going to continue delaying kind of rollout at large-scale retailers like Walmart and Target. That being said, if you're well-capitalized and you run a tight ship and you've got a good business model and you can make money in this environment, you can make a lot of money down the road.
Oh, great. So how does vertical wellness fit into this landscape?
Well, I've been answering that a little bit as we've talked, but we're really vertically integrated. So we're doing large scale production where, again, we harvested 1,800 acres. We got 4 million pounds off of that grow last year. And that's then being processed at our facility in Kentucky into CBD oils and isolates and various derivative products, which then go into our own brand portfolio, which we're now launching. And we recently signed a long-term agreement with Kathy Ireland. Kathy, who was a famous model, but now has a very successful business empire, sells over $2 billion worth of merchandise using her brands. And we're really excited about that partnership and all our other brands. So we're really a brand company with a large-scale production capability on the back end.
Oh, great. So we recently went through the COVID-19 era and saw a lot of changes there. And it seems like it accelerates some sectors and decelerates others. What did you see in the cannabis space get accelerated and what did you see getting decelerated?
So again, the demand held up for CBD and cannabis in general. It was deemed an essential business. So we were able to operate at full scale. We've got 2 shifts working in our Kentucky facility. So that's been a very positive note. What slowed down is the retailers' willingness to bring in new products. They mostly were focused on essentials like food and cleaning supplies, and a lot of them were hesitant to bring in new categories. So I think that slowed out some of the brand rollouts in general, but overall the demand has held up. So I think the retailers have started to come back to the table and, they all have an interest in growth. And I think this is a category that has unique characteristics of growth.
And so what new applications do you think are going to come up in the next 12 months?
Well, we're really excited about the technology of delivery systems. So I recently acquired another company that had developed patented delivery systems for cannabinoids that in essence make a cannabinoid substance like CBD enter your bloodstream much faster and with greater efficacy. So what it does is in an ingestible form, like food and beverage, it's fast acting. So instead of waiting an hour or more to get the effects, it actually goes into effect in 20 to 30 minutes, and you can use less of it to get the same effect. So we're really excited about using technology and mingling that with brands. And I think that's really where this is going to go, because at the end of the day, consumers have this huge interest level in the CBD space, but they don't have a lot of trust because there's so many little brands that, and lots of folks that maybe, haven't done it the right way necessarily. And so having brands that people trust, like Kathy Ireland, in our midst enables us to, really overcome that and become that trusted source to the general public. And so we're pretty excited about that.
And so how did you think COVID-19 changed investors' thesis for this sector? What are they going to do differently based on it?
Well, interestingly, because of what I described earlier, this category in general was already in massive distress. It's massively growing, but it was in massive distress before COVID-19. I think what's happening now is we're having a separation. both in the cannabis space and in the hemp space, what we're seeing is that the undercapitalized and companies that are not generating cash are really having a difficult time in this environment. So it's a flight to quality. What I think I'm seeing across the investment community is they're attracted to operating teams that survived this tough environment and that are making money in a COVID world. And that's attracting, it's kind of like strength attracts strength. And so it's kind of self-fulfilling, but it just adds to the advantage of those that are good operators. And we're seeing that in the stock market. You're seeing that in the public companies that have gone out and were public and their stocks all traded down. But now you're seeing a big separation. There's still a long tail of companies that are not very profitable and don't have enough capital in them. And those are trading really poorly. And then you've got a handful of companies that are operating profitably, that have a lot of capital, and that clearly are separating from the pack. And Vertical Wellness is one of those.
Right. Well, in the pandemic for COVID-19, many businesses had to shut down, and I see investors looking for COVID-proof businesses to invest in going forward. What does a startup in this space have to do to COVID-proof their business?
Well, again, it's the fundamentals of blocking and tackling, making sure you can generate cash and that you have enough of a base of capital to survive an extended period. And, I think what we've done really effectively is we've been nimble in a tough environment, and that's really giving us a lot of strength now going forward. Generally speaking, a startup needs to do those things anyway. But I think in this situation, you can't rely on, you just don't know where this thing's going to hit, right? And whether it's going to shut down. Like, for instance, we have a whole line of spa and beauty products that we're really excited about because, massage oil and lotions and pain creams, and there's a lot of interest in that. But the spa sector is kind of shut down right now because the hotels have been, at a fraction of their capacity. So that's one where if all I had was that would be a problem. But that's just one of many product lines that I carry. So we're just being nimble about where things are working and where things are going to take longer.
Great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Well, look, I think it's, I don't know if this is a hemp CBD cannabis 2.0 or if it's another number, but it's certainly a different moment in time than it was a few years ago. And I think what we're seeing is, again, separation of companies that have strength and really a flight to quality. And so I would encourage everyone to kick the tires, make sure that they have really looked at the management teams and whether they've created an independent board with good governance, all the normal stuff that you look for in a business that gives you comfort that they're running it properly and using best practices. Those things apply to cannabis and hemp. And I think even more so in some ways because of the history of this category being not permitted and a number of folks that have tried to come from the illegal market into the legal market. As a guy who grew up in a regulated industry in alcohol beverage, I'm really used to this regulated system and I'm very comfortable in it. And I think that's one of the things that everyone needs to look at is like, who are you betting on and are they comfortable and are they going to be compliant and operate in a safe and good way in a regulated business?
Great. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Well, Wallin at vertical-wellness.com is my email. You can follow me on social media, Smoke Wallin at Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and everything under the sun. You can find me under my real name because I don't really, that's the way it should be. And so, please, reach out. I'm happy to set up a Zoom or a conversation with anyone that's interested. And we are going to close out our current offering in August 15th, and we're getting a great response to that. So if there's interest, we'd certainly want to have those conversations quickly.
Great. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Hall. Appreciate it.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Halti Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.